Oh, there's the van. It's been a while since the last video. Sorry about that. Um, a lot has happened in here. And I should preface this by saying, well, I got to a point where I kind of stopped documenting the process of building out the van. It's been very time consuming, and certain projects have taken weeks at a time because I'm going over to my parents' house and using their garage. And so things have been staggered out. I haven't been doing one-day builds on various pieces of the van, and so it's been a little more difficult to keep track of what I'm doing. So I'll just go ahead and give you a tour because at this point the van is pretty much finished and ready for me to go on the road. So let's start with everything I've done since the last video. The key thing, I think, is the electrical system. I installed an inlet outside the van that allows me to plug into shore power whenever I go to a campground or RV park or wherever. The power inlet goes to my breaker box, which in turn splits off and goes to two outlets that I've installed in the kitchen countertop that are only available on shore power. The other power source from the breaker box goes to a power transfer switch. The power transfer switch goes to my inverter as well as a power outlet that's on the side of my kitchen. The way it works is whenever the vehicle is plugged into shore power, the transfer switch detects that and therefore it provides power to that outlet. If I'm not plugged into shore power, the transfer switch will detect something from the inverter if the inverter is on, so I can run stuff off the inverter on this one outlet I have on the side of the kitchen. So underneath me here in this bench is the 12-volt leisure / house battery, whatever you want to call it, that powers all the DC systems in the van. Now above me here is my DC breakout panel. These are all the switches that control the DC systems. So starting from left to right here, I have my master switch that turns on DC power to all the rest of these switches. This turns on the overhead lights as well as the gas detector that's down below the kitchen here. The next switch over is the power switch for the voltmeter. It also powers these two utility ports up here. So I have a 12-volt car adapter port as well as two USB ports. The third switch I have on here is the fan power. That turns on the fan power for the overhead fan. Then the fourth switch is power for the refrigerator. Now the refrigerator, by the way, will switch over automatically to AC power if I'm plugged into an RV park power pedestal. The fifth switch is for the water pump that's in the sink. The pump won't actually come on until I open the valve in the sink, so it has power on standby for that. And finally, the last switch here is my DC to AC power inverter. That provides AC power in the van if I need to run AC power. However, I only have 600 watts to work with, so I can't do a whole lot with it. Now, speaking of AC power, I should mention that I do have some AC electronics in here, starting with my microwave, and then I have my toaster oven. I plan to only run those two items when I'm in a state park or campground that has shore power available to me. In my previous videos, I did some cabinetry work. Since then, I have done more cabinetry work. However, I have not been documenting it. Right, for instance, there's this cabinet above my head here. This one is small because it's right above the door and I don't want to hit my head on it when I'm getting in and out of the van. It just has some sundry kitchen stuff, like for instance, I have a measuring cup in here and some drinking cups on the other side. I have some bowls for, cereal and soups and whatnot. Then I have a paper towel dispenser over here as well. The other cabinetry I worked on was the shelf for the microwave oven and the shelf for the toaster oven. Now the microwave oven was a bit more complicated because this thing is heavy and there's not a lot of good mounting points inside the van that make this thing secure, and in a crash this thing could become a deadly projectile. So what we ended up doing was putting a steel bar across the roof of the van, drilling holes down through the body and making mounting points that way. It's very solid and I feel pretty confident that it's not going anywhere. So let's talk about plumbing. I mentioned before that I have a water pump in my sink over there. Now that water pump is fed by a 6-gallon fresh water tank that I installed underneath the van. I found a nice little spot between the spare tire and the fuel tank to fit a water tank, therefore I don't have to have one inside the actual cabin of the van. Now I have plumbing that runs up through the floor to the sink, as well as an inflow valve that runs up to the back door where I can fill the tank. So you may have noticed in here that I have curtains all around me. I did not document the process of making those curtains, but essentially what I did was I ordered some cheap curtains off of Amazon, and then I had to learn how to sew. I used my mom's sewing machine at home and had to hem up the curtains so that they would be the right heights to match all the windows in here. I also sewed magnets into the edges of the curtains so that whenever I close this place up at night, I get a nice seal against the edges of the van so that I have some privacy in here when I'm sleeping. I'm really happy with how the curtains turned out, despite my lack of sewing skills. I'm definitely not a seamstress. Speaking of sewing, I'm sure you've noticed in here that my cushions now are covered in fabric. I did not do that myself. I realized early on that I did not have the skill set required to do the complicated sewing of adding zippers and making rectangular sleeves, so I went ahead and paid a local upholsterer to do that for me. He did a fantastic job. I couldn't have done as quarter of good of the work as he did, so I was fine making that expense and moving on from it from there. Well, that's pretty much it for the van tour. I am so relieved that it's finally done. It's been over a year in the making, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. I'm excited because pretty soon here I'm going to hit the road and head out and see the natural splendor of this country, of America, and see some national parks and try to enjoy life a little bit because I haven't been on vacation in a long time. I'll definitely be documenting that. You can count on it. Look for pictures on my social media and hopefully video here as well. I want to thank you all for watching, especially those of you who've been here since the beginning when I first started building out the van, and including those of you who've jumped in midway through or wherever and have encouraged me along the build. I want to thank you for that. So I guess until next time, I'll see you on the road. Goodbye, everybody.